Hello, welcome to the Wizard's Respite, the show where we talk about all things TTRPG and nerddom and funness. As always, I am Ash, your host of the show today, and I am joined by Zach. Zach, how are you doing?
Hi, everybody. Don't worry about my voice. I don't want to talk about it. But other than that, I'm all right. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to do the show. I'm excited.
I am too. I think this is going to be a fun show. We're going to be talking about our favorite actual play podcast today. But before we do that, we've been spoken to by our audience. We got some audience comments that we'd like to respond to. Zach,
Yeah.
what do you got over there?
Anyway, you guys want to comment to us, we'll try and read them out since our audience is still nice and small. It's something I like to do on the video game podcast on Old Man Gaming, so I love that we're doing it here too. We just haven't gotten comments before. So right off the bat, we got Philbilly330. Hank Riggins fears no vampire, and I can go ahead and say that Hank Riggins is his hunter in the garage game of World of Darkness, and he's got a really interesting character there because that character just wants to kill vampires, like that's like his whole goal in life, and does not realize how strong they are. So like he's just and he keeps winning though because you've been around Phil. It's impossible to kill Phil or hurt Phil, so he's having fun with it because he gets to play him with this like sense of overconfidence, because he's already killed one vampire. So
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, and that was from our World of Darkness podcast, right?
Yes, this is all from our World of Darkness podcast 2 weeks ago. You guys can check it out on Spotify or YouTube, or just go to wizardsrespite.com. And then we got Jackie, otherwise known as Hope Child, in the TMNT and Other Strangeness. She had 3 different comments, so I'm going to go through them. The first one is White Wolf started in 1986. Wow, I was a whole year old. Well, you made me feel old, Jackie, because I was 4. So yeah, but White Wolf is one of the old schoolies, the old school ones,
Oh
the
yeah.
ones from the before time, before
And
the nerds were cool.
and back then it was kind of Wild West for our RPG.
Yeah.
They were new,
Yes.
relatively new. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, you had
they came
Gary
in strong.
Gygax and D&D, and then after that, like you didn't have any systems to base anything off of, you know. I think that's why kind of we're in a golden age for RPGs because like first of all, it's more widely accepted thanks to what we're going to talk about today, but second of all, it's just like you have all these systems, you have basically like do and do not maps, you know,
Yeah.
of what to do, and then you can just tailor make your system to what you want it to be. It's a homebrewer's golden age, I would say.
I would, and it is a golden age. Things are getting popular. I just want to throw one thing out there for the old timers and for those who started this whole thing. Thank you for starting this off. I mean, honestly, like, uh, I really feel like yes, we're in an era where games are getting like more polished, but somebody had to be the trailblazer. Somebody
Yeah,
had to start this off,
yeah.
and those were those old school games back in the '80s and late '70s.
Well, and I don't throw any shade their way. I mean, you've got to think
Yeah.
like they kind of had an idea of what they wanted to do and no real roadmap whatsoever of how to do it, you know.
Yeah.
So it just became a thing, you know. So they had to just write it from scratch, you know. Like you and I, when we go to make a game or make a supplement for a game, we can take a lot of different our gaming experience and go, this is what we want it to be, this is what we want. These guys were like, I want to pretend to be a werewolf, and I want to pretend to be a werewolf with other people. How do I do that? Well, I guess I'll make it up, and then they made up the system from there, you know. So
Yeah.
that's I have no shade towards them, and my nitpicks reflect my irritations with them, but that's not to say that they weren't trailblazers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. You have to start somewhere, and that's how you build.
And even when I was talking about it being too novelized, they were obviously trying something different. You know what I mean? You had the very stat heavy D&D, and the open ended kind of story and lore. And I think maybe they
Yeah.
looked at that and were like, let's try and make the rules in the lore. And it did not work for me. It did not work for me in any way, shape, or form. But you got to take stabs. You got to roll the dice. You know, my
That's why you're a trailblazer. Because
right,
you don't have
right,
anything else to go. Okay, this guy's doing it this way. I want to do my own thing. Roll lore and rules together.
right.
Some people are going to be okay with it. Some people are going to hit their head against the walls with it.
Yes.
You're not going to know. I mean, nobody knows.
Yeah, you know, you're always like you got to try new things. When I started the Axiom Games LLC, the first game we released was a card-based professional wrestling game. It was not there was so many problems with it, you know, and it seemed so good on paper and it was different, and that's why we took that stab. But by the time we were done with dealing with the company for the first time, and that's something we learned there, like I don't want to deal with that company anymore. So I switched companies of where I produce my games. You know, the card based system didn't really work as well as I thought it would. So we switched back to dice. It's kind of a learning experience, you know.
Absolutely.
Jackie then goes
What
on
else
to
did Jackie say?
yeah, she said there is also demons you can play too. I actually did mention the demons. I snuck it in there, Jackie. But yeah, there's also demons and angels you can play. I mean, not at the garage game because Johnny still won't read the book. Come on, Johnny, get on there. And then Jackie says, nope, you still have the same run-ons with the books. I'm guessing she's talking about the new ones. It's just amazing. But I do want to say thank you to both Jackie and Phil for commenting. We appreciate it. Anybody wants to comment their stuff, we'll try and read them out the next time we do the podcast.
Much appreciated. Much appreciated. Okay, well, should we jump into today's this week's topic?
I'm down. I'm down.
All right, so this week we are discussing actual play podcasts. Like you mentioned, Zach, that's a good portion, I think, of the success and the golden age aura that we are in the middle of living in right now. Is these podcasts that have come out of people playing these games and having a good time and kind of showing how the systems work and what you can do with these games.
Yeah, so actual play podcasts, I think actual play, you obviously we're going to talk about Critical Role, I think. And while Critical Role is by no means my favorite live play or actual play, I think they're really the trendsetters that kind of blew it up. You know what I mean? Because we really didn't have these kind of shows or podcasts. There was Nerd Poker. I do want to shout them out a while before them with Brian Posehn. But this was the first one that kind of exploded. It got the mainstream kind of spotlight to the point where they've made shows out of it now. You can watch the animated cartoon, which I watched the first 2 seasons of. So Critical Role was kind of the one that started it, but the actual play podcasts kind of exploded from there. We have tons of them. It's impossible to go through them all with any success whatsoever.
Yeah, no, you try even looking. My biggest complaint about the whole actual play podcast thing is it's hard to like sort through them. Nobody has like a good system of figuring out how to categorize systems, genre of the game. Like, is it a horror like story? Is it an action adventure? Is it an irreverent, funny sort of comedy?
Right.
You can't suss through that stuff. That's the only my complaint about this. I love these things.
Starting with a nitpick again.
I know we are.
I agree with you on that. I think that like there have been so many actual play podcasts that I've listened to 1 or 2 episodes of and then been like, this isn't what I was looking for, and then moved on to another one. I think that like it's really hard to wade through the mountain of it. And in fairness, we're doing this now. Like this is something we do on a regular basis. And we produce quite a few of them actually, with more coming. So, and yeah, it is very frustrating to kind of try and find what you're looking for. One thing I do whenever, so like little inside baseball, if that's all right, Wiz.
Yeah.
Whenever we are about to start a new actual play podcast or live play stream. So that's how we do it on Old Man Gaming. We have live play streams, which is Astral Drive bi-weekly on Wednesdays, and then we have TMNT, the Sump Gang storyline, that is once a month. Those are live play. We play live in front of you guys. Then we have some actual play stuff coming up. We've got a Doctor Who series that we're working on. We have a gothic horror based off our new setting for Single Month coming up. And then there's a couple of, and then we also have our one-on-one sessions are going to turn into that. And we have some more like Stump Gang side quest nonsense coming your way. But whenever I decide to whenever we're about to make a new one, I go to Spotify or to TTRPG Twitter, and I try and find other actual play podcasts like us or like that. So like when I decided to do the Doctor Who one, I'm gonna give a shout out to this one. Anywhere But Now is I would say if you search for Doctor Who actual play podcast, it's gonna be the first one that pops up. But Anywhere But Now is a Doctor Who actual play podcast. I wanted to see what they were doing so that I could kind of get a feel for what I should or should not be doing in my Doctor Who thing.
Right.
We're now
Market
going
research.
exactly. We're now going to be doing the Gothic horror. I just started listening to the Thorn Files podcast, which is an interesting one. Another one I just kind of ripped off TTRPG Twitter. Because there's a lot of actual play podcasts on Twitch. Just go on there on a Whip Wednesday. You're going to find like 42 actual play podcasts to pick from.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how I kind of do things for that. But it's very hard to sift through and find the thing you're looking for.
And just so everybody knows, Zach is the producer of all of these things that he's talking about us doing, and he does a lot of hard work on the back end of these things. I just want to make it very clear, when he's saying he's doing this, he really means he is doing all of this work, which is quite extensive.
I don't know what to do with compliments. Thank you. I appreciate it. I've come to realize some things about myself, and they are just to get deep. I can't hang out. Like I'm incapable of hanging out with anyone but my wife. If I'm doing something with you, it's got to be like a game, or playing game,
Right.
or editing a game, or something. Like I'm just I don't know. I'm just 42 years. I'm becoming more self-aware. There are times when I go to the garage session again inside baseball. I'm sorry I keep getting on these digressions, but it's where my brain's going today. There's times at the garage session, which I've talked about many times, which is my live in-person gaming group, that it turns into like nobody plays, and it turns into everybody just chit-chatting. Like there's a time, like you get there at like 7:30, and then everybody who's eating dinner is like eating dinner, and everybody hangs out, and we start playing between 8 and 9. If we don't start playing by like 10, we're not playing. I can't do it. And I love all those guys. I consider all those guys my friends. If they showed up at my house and they needed a place to sleep, I wouldn't turn them away. Like that's how important all of them are to me. I just can't sit there and talk about nothing. I gotta go do something. Like I just have to. It's really weird, and it's my fault now. Yeah, it's like the minute it hits 11, and it's just a talking session. I'm like, all right, I'm out. I'm not giving up sleep for this. I love you guys, but I'm out. You know.
I don't know what it is either for me either. I think it's just my mind is always going to the next thing to do.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for me to focus on just small talk or chit chat or any of that stuff, because I am like, okay, what should I be doing now, or what do I need? And then obviously I'm talking with my hands. I got to have something to do, and that's why for me, like those games, like I have to have a game to go to. Maybe we could have a solid conversation about a movie or something where we're really trying to figure something out. What the heck was that thing about? But it's got to be something like that.
Right. Yeah, record it and put it on the internet so that I can feel like I'm accomplishing something. You know?
Exactly.
Like it's tough. It's tough. And I told my wife the other day, I was like, you should really feel honored. And she's like, why? I'm like, you're the only person I hang out with. She's like, what do you
Yeah.
mean? She's like, you see your friends all the time. I was like, no, I do stuff with my friends. I hang out with you. I sit on the chair and I watch crappy reality television with you and just accomplish nothing. The only person on the planet I could do that with. Every other person, it's like, yeah, every other person.
Like
I'm
that
like,
with my wife too.
yeah. As I was like, I think that's why we're married. Like, all love aside, I think you're the only person that I could literally spend this time just sitting here, not accomplishing something.
Tales of the workaholic nerds.
That make no money.
Yeah.
We're good at pretending. So, do you want to get into what our favorites are now that we've completely digressed off the subject for like 10 straight minutes?
I do. Ooh, favorites. This was hard to pick favorites for me.
Okay.
But I do have a couple that I really like that I wanted to throw some shout outs to and kind of dive into what I like about them so much.
I only have two, and I think that one
Okay.
of mine is going to be exactly the same as yours.
Okay,
Given
maybe
what
we
I
should
know
start with
about
that
us.
one then. Maybe we
Given,
should start about that one. Because I think I know the exact one you're talking about, and if I'm right, that's going to be, of course, Two Monsters Rolling Dice.
yes, yes, they're amazing. I want to tell everybody out there, man, that
Yeah.
they're so succinct and good at doing the editing in the back end, and I know that they've gotten into like, I almost feel bad for them because like when I do all this work on the behind the scenes, and I do quite a bit of work in the behind the scenes. You're right about that, but at the same time, I do shitty work in the behind the scenes. Like it's the bare minimum to get the stuff out because it's quantity over quality for me. Sometimes I wish I could like sit down with them and be like, just make it less good for like everybody will still listen and you'll get it done 2 hours faster. Just make it slightly less good. They edit so well. The dialogue, the story. There's not a moment listening to it where you get bogged down with dice rolls, and you still get the dice rolls. There's not a moment listening to it where you're like, okay, we've been in this combat for like 13 minutes. There's not a moment listening to it where you're in a conversation and you're like, they've been here too long. They are so good at moving that story and editing the final copy. Not even aside from all the sound effects and music they put into it.
I was gonna say, like, they also expertly layer sound effects and music in, and it matches the beat to the moment that they're in perfectly. Somebody, not just the sound effect size, but the music, which is actually kind of tough. But somebody draws a gun and shoots, the music matches that moment.
Yeah.
It's that's not easy to do.
It's like listening to an audio drama. It's not even like listening to an actual play. And it's just so good. Not to mention, all those players have just great personalities. They're fun to listen to. They're personable. They're just enjoyable people that you can empathize with, both their characters and the people in real life. And I just love that podcast so much. And they've gone away. They did a first season, they called it, which I think was something like, was it like 20 episodes, maybe 30 episodes? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's about 30 episodes, yeah.
It was good. And they did the Uncanny Valley, which is just all this like fantasy Western stuff, which is another cool thing because there's almost no fantasy Western stuff out there for actual plays that I've seen anyway. And then they called it because their life got too busy. I think the game master had a baby, and then they had other stuff going on. And they've actually recently said on Twitter that they've got a couple of like one-shots coming our way, which is really good. But they've been off air for, I'd say, like 4 or 5 months. I think they stopped in November.
Yeah, which is always real rough. It's definitely, despite the fact that they weren't able to continue on with the second season,
Yeah,
it's worth the listen because
it's so worth it.
I mean, it's just fun. It's a fun, entertaining listen. I can't tell you how many of my commutes I got through because of those guys, because my commute was horrible while I was listening to this.
It still
And
has
they
a
made
lot
it
of great payoffs. And
It does.
look, if you're listening to this and you're not a lifelong tabletop role-playing gamer, okay, you won't understand. So I'm going to explain it. And the one thing I want to say, just on the off chance that any of those people at Two Monsters listen to this show, first of all, you are the only live play, actual play, any podcast, like listen to podcast, improvised podcast, the only podcast in the history of the world that I have given money to. I gave you guys money. It wasn't a lot. It was $5. I didn't have a lot. But I gave you guys money because you earned it. The other thing I want to say, and I've never given money to anybody. Like, not on YouTube, not on Patreon, not anywhere. Not because I don't think people deserve it. It's just I don't have it to spend. I gave them $5. That's how good they are to me. The second thing is, look, role-playing games are hard. They're tough. They're tough to keep people going, and they're tough to keep people into. And you shouldn't do it just to do it. And even though it's a podcast, you're making a podcast, you're making a show. If you guys are out there are listening and you never go back to Uncanny Valley, it was a beautiful story for what it is, and I loved it, and that's okay. How many times have us as role-playing game players started something, got halfway through it, then the group falls apart and you never finish it? It doesn't make that game bad. It was still fun. It was still great. It was still there. It just means that it's not going to get finished, and that's okay. Like, tabletop role-playing games are like that sometimes. Yeah. You guys do great work. If you never come back, I will be happy with what you created. Don't get me wrong. I very much want you guys to come back. Like I said, gave you money. But if you never come back, you guys have given me hours of joy, like listening to the show. And I actually cried at a couple of moments. I never cry at that shit. And you guys actually got me to cry a couple of times, man.
There was some heartfelt moments in there.
There was.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good show. It's a really good show. And actually, one thing I'd like to talk about for the actual play stuff is a little bit of a divide between sort of the more indie people that are trying to do this themselves, and like the big production, the guys that have the money backing them to do they can maybe do it in a studio, or they have the money to get advertising up. These guys, not Two Monsters Rolling Dice, they were the smaller guys. You could tell, like, I mean, they had their equipment and stuff, but at the same time, when they were talking about where they were setting up and how they were getting this going, they really put the energy in. They sounded good, but they also sounded like they were people that really wanted to do this. They didn't have like a corporation sending them money to buy all this stuff for them. They invested themselves, and I really appreciated that degree of energy they put into it.
I am definitely glad that the whole like Critical Role kind of like there was this fad right after Critical Role got big where every internet company would also do an actual play with their personalities. When G4 TV was around, they did a production of an actual play, and it sucked, in my opinion. And I think it's one of those things where it's like, you don't need to do this. I think the best time that an actual play is good is when everybody's there just to play the game and you're recording it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that's when it's really fun. That's when it's really fun to listen to. That's when it's really fun to experience. I think that like when you get into these like super produced stuff, and actually that's one of my biggest problems with Critical Role now. You can see from their stuff nowadays that they just have so much money and they can do a lot more production stuff with it. And it's almost like, for me, going back and watching them in the beginning and watching them now, it's kind of like, are you guys still having fun with this? Or are you doing this because this makes you money? And don't get me wrong, I understand a job. I understand a job. Nobody understands a job better than me. But at the same time, it's taken a little bit of the fun out of it for me,
I can see that. Yeah, like a little bit more rougher around the edges, or a little bit more energy into the just joy of playing these games.
Right.
Is definitely valued, and I can see that with the Critical Role show 100%. I don't listen to Critical Role much anymore, and there are other shows that I like, and there's Well, do you have any others? You said you had two, right?
I got one more. I definitely have one more actual play that I want to shout out.
Okay, what's your second one before we go down another rabbit hole? Because I got a couple that
Okay.
I
It's Roll and Tell. Roll and Tell. Seek them out.
that was
They're
actually another
awesome.
one of mine.
That was another one of yours? What they're
Yeah.
doing is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. And I want to, for anybody who doesn't watch the video game side of my channel, that's Old Man Gaming. I am very, very into procedural generation. Like stuff that is unique to you. Like the video games that are like, here is something completely unique to you. No other player is going to experience. That's the kind of stuff that really gets me. State of Decay and the procedurally generated characters that you have to keep alive in the zombie apocalypse. I've played so much of that game because of it. Wildermyth and the procedurally generated story around you. There's so many of these games that are just so awesome. With that being said, they have figured out a way to procedurally generate the story for themselves using a ton of different like charts and codes and stuff like that. They play Dungeon
Yeah.
World mostly for the characters and the combat. That's what they play. But then they have just all these source books that they've put together with different charts for like what do we get from fighting the bad guys? What bad guys are we fighting? What are we creating? And what they do is they literally generate the story for themselves. They're not really game mastering each other. They're letting the dice do it and then kind of making the story up as they go. I love Roll and Tell. I absolutely worship the ground Roll and Tell walks on. And I still haven't caught up because it takes me so long to listen to everything to
Yeah.
catch up. But I love them. I absolutely love them. I love what they're doing. They're great. And I always come back to them. Like, always come back to them. No matter what I listen to other than that, I end up back on them trying to catch up again, you know?
Yeah, yeah. It's a really clever concept that they have put together here. And, just, for a little clarification, with not everybody is 100% familiar with procedurally generated sort of systems, they will have a lot of tables they roll a dice on, they read what's on the table, and that's what we call procedurally generated. You could roll a table and now you're fighting an
Yeah.
encounter because that's what the table says.
The idea
Um,
is it's randomly generated, but there are parameters to the randomization, basically.
right.
And that's how
And
video games define it.
and there are various tables and they're scenarios. It's not just a randomly generated dungeon crawl. It is scenarios that their characters have to role play through, and they
Yeah.
have to use they're using an imagination and their system to create a story
Yeah.
that the dice just throws at them, and they have to figure their way out through it. And
Well,
like you said, they did this with so many different
yeah.
books. They did it with different systems, and it's
It's so
really
good.
impressive and a clever idea.
Yeah, we've talked about it before on the podcast, how much of playing role playing games is improv. It's
Yeah.
grabbing that improv part of your brain and trying to work with it. And these guys are literally improving the entire story based on suggestions from books. And it is the stuff they come up with. That's what I like, is they end up getting these things that are like just insane, and they have to kind of like try and pull it together to the point where like it makes a cohesive sense, and you get all like this living salamander made of bones that lives in a mountain that you walk through that can change the internal of the mountains, like just insane stuff like that. You just don't get anywhere else, any other game, because they're literally randomly rolling everything up and then making the story based on the pieces that the tables give you. And it's so good. It's the core of role playing, in my opinion. There is no show out there that better shows you the core of playing a role playing game, just playing a role playing game, because they show you the generation side of things and they show you the improv side of things. And that's one thing that would be my nitpick about actual plays, is they tend to be, when they are produced, they tend to fail to correctly represent to people who don't play role playing games what a role playing game is. And you just think, oh, it's this story, this interactive story. but there's so much more that goes into it on the improv side, and
Yeah.
like I've said before, getting to the core of a character. Like the idea is pretending to be somebody else, learning what that person is like, becoming empathetic to that person even if they're not like you, and then playing that person in game. This is the core of that. It's truly the core of role playing. If you listen to Roll and Tell, it is a masterclass on what the core of role playing is, which is, like I said, here's a character, pretend to be that character, and get to the core of that character, and get to the core of that story, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, absolutely. That's another really great one. So we both had we had two of our your top
Great
two
minds.
are
Great
on my
minds.
list too. Yeah, and we didn't discuss this beforehand or anything. Like we
No.
just both really like those
No.
two podcasts quite a bit, and I think it's pretty apparent that we have good reasons as to why we like them so much.
Yeah.
We've thought about it, and that's the conclusion we came to. All right, so I got a couple more
All right, hit me.
I want to throw out there.
I think I know one of yours.
It's the Game Master Mondays.
That's the one. That's the one.
Yeah.
That's the one. I knew it.
There's a couple of reasons why I want to throw this one out there. First off, everything that we've talked about from the other ones is there for me. There's good production value. These are real people, not a production, not producers telling what people to say or how they should act in certain situations. Now it's these are real people really doing a game and really enjoying themselves and having an entertaining and fun time doing it. So all that's there. The other thing that I gotta throw out there that I love about these things is they will go through multiple systems at a time. Sometimes they'll have a little arc that's 3 or 4, even 5 sessions or episodes. And then they'll go on to a new game system. And that one will maybe be a tiny little solo RPG or co-op RPG. And it's really quick and fast, and it's one session. That is so good for the hobby.
Uh-huh.
I love that because you get to see these games in action, in play with people who are enjoying themselves.
Yeah.
And it's an entertaining show. So I had to bring them up. They're just a fantastic. It's really good for the hobby in general. I think just to have people showing this variety, all of this flexibility within our great hobby of that what you can do, and doing a show well on top of it is fantastic to me.
I couldn't agree more. It's one of the reasons that you and I have played the one-on-one sessions a couple of times. So far, we've done the last Tea Shop, which was 2 shows, and then we did Amongst the Starlight Wreckage, and then we also did Sunfish Sitting There, which was a one-on-one. We brought in a couple other kind of guest people. That stuff's so important to me because, and it's one of the things that we've recently talked about, rescheduling some things and how we do that so that we can keep doing it, because it's the same thing. It's you want to get as much of those games out there in the world, show people those games. We also tend to play more independent games, and Game Master Monday tends to do that as well, which I really appreciate, because they're not just here's D&D, here's White Wolf, here's, Mechton Zeta, just the big ones. They're showing you these kind of more independent games out of nowhere, And I have actually listened to a couple episodes of Game Master Monday. I think it's a really good show. It's one of those that I also really like it because I can jump in on something that sounds interesting, listen to those episodes, and then walk away from it until something else interesting comes into it. And that's a really cool thing for a podcast, because a lot of the actual play podcasts, it's another one of my nitpicks is if you get into one, you're listening to a lot of hours of podcasting, and I don't always have time. Like I said, Roll and Tell is probably one of my favorites. I have not caught up. Uncanny Valley and Two Monsters Rolling Dice was nice because I caught them when they started. You know, they were only
Right.
3 or 4 episodes in when I started listening to them, so I was able to like listen to them every week and stay with them. Whereas the other stuff, it's like usually they're established and they have seasons that you have to listen to be able to kind of catch up, and that is intimidating. It's so intimidating to like
Can be.
jump in. You know what I mean? It just is. I think that like I think if possible, because a lot of people like a game, they like characters, and they want to stay with them. I think if possible, every so often you should switch the game. You know what I mean? Like go through a
Yeah.
campaign and then switch it off, so that that campaign is just this enclosed thing that people can listen to when they have time. You know, instead of like, God, they're putting an episode out a week. I can only listen to one episode a week, and there's 52 episodes of backlog. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to be able to switch off like that. You can show
Yeah.
more of the hobby like that. It offers more varieties, so people can stay like
Yeah.
a little bit more excited. Oh, what are they gonna do this season? This is cool.
Yeah.
Um, so there's definitely a lot of good things that can come of that just in general. And then um, Game Master Mondays packs that all into one season,
Yeah.
which is a lot of fun. And yeah, you're right. Like there are a couple of podcasts that do that, and I think Two Monsters were even thinking about doing that, switching to another
Yeah.
game if they at some point come back, which hopefully they do. We
They
might
they
see
they
at
did
least
a
for
little
some.
teaser on Twitter, which for like a dinosaur thing,
Yeah,
which I was like, okay, I'm down, I'm all in for a
yeah,
little one shot. Like if that's what you give us, that's what you give us. You know, you don't have to ever go back to Uncanny Valley. I'm gonna listen to them because they're good. You know.
yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. Um, okay, so I think that might just be that was my big list. That was my list
Okay. All
for
right.
this one.
I think this is a really nice tight show, honestly. I think we're good. I think that like I do want to like just cap off. I think that everything we said here was really useful and interesting. Again, anybody out there thinking about doing a one shot, DM me on Twitter. I will give you a free copy of Single Mod if you want to try it out. Free system.
Yeah,
It's usually only $6 on itch. But if you want to play it live, I mean, I'm sorry, this is plugging early, but if you want to play something live on your podcast or something, or you want to take a one shot with a different system, it's relatively simple. It's only 44 pages. It's relatively simple and easy to understand. DM me on
fast paced
Twitter.
game, fast paced
Yeah,
game.
yeah,
Lots of energy. Uh, you can play combat heavy. You can play role play heavy. You're just gonna be playing it fast and fun.
yeah.
So I,
Thank you. I appreciate it. I think that everybody out there can also check out all the ones we do. I do appreciate. I think they're a lot of fun to watch. They are in no way, shape, or form as well edited as some of the ones we've mentioned here. But I'm slowly getting better at it. I think the Doctor Who series is going to be something really special when it comes out.
can't
But
wait for that.
yeah, it's going to be fun. Especially since my brother did a whole bunch of music just for it, like background
Oh,
music.
nice.
So we actually have like a theme song and everything that's not copyright claimed. It's great. So yeah, I would definitely say watch here, but check out whatever you want. Check out any of the ones we've listed here. We listed Uncanny Valley, Roll and Tell, Game Master Monday, and that was it, right? Those are big ones.
Uh, yeah,
Okay.
I think that's pretty much it. I think those are our big ones.
All
Those are
right,
our favorites.
we'll wrap it up then, Wiz.
All right. Well, as always, you can catch all of the shows that we do at thewizardsrespite.com. I'm also doing shirts on there and articles about pretty much all things CTRPG. You can catch us both on Twitter. I think we do a fair amount here. You can leave comments on YouTube. And of course, check out Zach's content on the video game side. There are, of course, crossover between TTRPG and
Yes.
and video game nerds out there. So pick this stuff up.
We actually
Zach,
have a
is there anything
show
in
meant
particular
for
you
you.
want to shout out?
We're trying to do Baldur's Gate 330, which is me and Phil Billy like role playing our characters in Baldur's Gate while we play it. So it's kind of equal parts us riffing on each other and equal parts us in character. Me doing a terrible Irish accent. pretending to be our characters, which has been kind of fun. It's been really fun. You can check that out. And then we have a ton of, we do reviews. I have a show where I book against another guy in WWE 2K23. I force my wife to game, who's not a gamer, which is funny because she just makes fun of me the entire time. We even have a kid show where my kid reviews Roblox games. So we've got a lot of video game content, but we also have a lot of TTRPG content, both already on the channel and coming soon. So please check out all of those. And yeah, that's it. That's all I got to plug.
All right. Well then, until next time, guys, keep rolling them dice.